My name is Claire, and it's my pleasure today to be presenting to you the letters of Francis Xavier, more commonly known as Frank Doyle. Frank was my grandfather, and unfortunately, he died in the early 1960s, a couple of decades before I was born. Frank's story begins in earnest in Rome, in the Vatican City, at Propaganda College in the late 1930s. Some of the photos that are in these slides that accompany this video presentation are from that period. There's a picture of Frank in the gardens outside the college in 1936 and with another couple of his fellow students in the same year. Also from that time is a postcard Frank sent to my grandmother Giselda from Rome, the handwritten card that's the writing side showing Frank took one glimpse at Giselda and decided that was it for him with the priesthood. This led to a massive estrangement with his family, the Doyles, and even my generation knows very little about them. Frank left the priesthood and he married Giselda in 1941 in a tiny little church called St Augustine's, which is really more like a chapel. It's now wedged between two skyscrapers on Bourke Street in Melbourne. They took off their lunch hour. With them, they only had two guests who acted as witnesses, which was the minimum that they needed to satisfy the priests and the state's laws. Afterwards, they went to the nearby botanical gardens and took a couple of photos, one of which turned out to be not blurry, the only one that wasn't blurry that day, and that's in this slideshow as well. Significantly, neither family was at their wedding. Giselda's family were farming and in regional Victoria, and Frank's were quite simply too disgusted to go. It had been a great honour that their son had been selected to go to the Vatican, and they were aghast when he no longer wished to wear priestly robes. Frank and Giselda had 9 children, 7 of which who survived infancy. Frank had a love affair of cars. He had an illustrious career with excellent wages. Coming with those positions were American cars, company cars, which greatly suited the ever-expanding family. Frank became the Kiwi Asia Pacific Director, and in the war he was also seconded by the Department of Defence's more secretive branch, and in the munitions department he was used because by that stage he was too old to draft with young children, and as a draftsman he designed some of the bomb huts that are down near the Westgate Bridge, shells and other weaponry. Photos then became an important part of Frank and Giselda's life, their great love affair, and their constantly growing brood of children. One of the photos here is the last full family photo in 1957. Yet no one, except possibly Frank, knew that that was to be the last full family photo. By that stage, Frank had figured out that he was dying. From his work in the munitions department and for Australia's spy agency in the war, he'd actually breathed in what was toxic and was slowly dying of leukemia, constantly coughing up black substances into his handkerchief. At this time, Michael, the oldest son, had reached his late teenage years. The letters that this essay that accompanies this presentation focus upon are Frank's business letters from this time. He uses his position to try and give his son some agency. He speaks, he advocates on his son's behalf. He tries to prepare his son for the world. He knows that my grandmother will become a widow with 7 children, most of whom are not even yet teenagers. The youngest of whom is actually quite severely disabled. Giselda was unemployed. She couldn't drive. And at this stage, Australia had no sole pension for single mothers, and Frank did not qualify for a veteran's pension because he'd worked for what is now ASIO and the munitions department. So his wife, his widow, was entitled to nothing, and because of one of the letters that Kiwi sent, it was fairly obvious that the family was going to be left with next to nothing. So a lot was riding upon Michael establishing a career. The final 2 photos in this short slide series are the 7 surviving children after my grandmother's funeral. And the last one is the family reunion that is held annually at Queenscliff and lasts for an entire weekend. It's Frank and Giselda's dream come true. A lasting gift to us all. Thank you for listening, and I hope you enjoyed my presentation.